Hi everyone and welcome back. Today I have a project that's kind of a vintage style floral card, and I decided to do some watercoloring on the card, and I'm using these Spectrum Noir Aqua markers that I've had in my drawer for a while. And I really like the control that you get with these markers. They're similar to using like a Zig Clean Color brush pen, only the tip is even a little bit more firmer than the Zigs. The one end has sort of a brush tip that reminds me of a Copic marker. And then the other end has more of a fine tip where you can kind of get in and do some detailing. And these work really well with water. And they kind of, you blend, what you do is you blend the marker with water onto your, usually you use watercolor cardstock, that works the best. But I've seen people scribble it onto an acrylic block and use it with a paintbrush. It works really nicely. You can also color directly on stamps and stamp them too. So that's something I'd like to try. I haven't tried that yet. But I was just in the mood to kind of do some watercoloring, and I like the vintage look of this stamp. And it's actually from the Deep Red Stamp Company, and it's called Floral Arrangement. And I've used this before on cards, and it's really pretty. It's fun to color. It's got a nice open areas to color and try different coloring mediums on. And it's a red rubber stamp, so it stamps really cleanly onto the watercolor cardstock. So we will go ahead and get started. And I kind of have everything all cut and ready to go. So I cut down my watercolor cardstock into about 4 3/4 by 3 1/4. And I'm using the side, I'm stamping on the side that's a little bit less rough. There are kind of two sides to the watercolor cardstock. And since I'm going to be doing a lot of stamping, I thought the less rough side or the less textured side would work better. So I'm just using my MISTI and kind of lining the stamp up into the middle of the little card panel. And I just realized I forgot to remove the pad from underneath my MISTI, so I have to take that off. I had to take that off, and then since the red rubber stamp already has the foam on it. So I'm just stamping it a couple times, and I'm using Hero Art's black dye ink because that works really well if you're going to be using water. And then I have a stamp set from Paper Tray Ink, and it's called It's the Thought. And since this floral stamp didn't have any matching sentiments, I like to go in and kind of look at all my sentiment stamps and figure out what would work well with the style of flower. And I keep all my sentiment stamps in separate little bins according to manufacturer. And I thought the pretty script writing of this particular stamp set would coordinate really well with the flowers. So I just went ahead and used that. And it actually tucks in really nicely in between the little leaves and everything of the flowers, so you can kind of get everything in close. So after I stamp my sentiment, or before I stamp my sentiment, I actually have to put the pad back in the MISTI. And I'm just going to, again, stamp it with some Hero Arts black dye ink. And I'm just tucking that into the little floral leaves. And it's helpful to have the stamp platform because it stamps really nicely onto that watercolor cardstock. So now I just have a little cup of water, and I like to use a really stiff, short paintbrush when I'm doing my watercoloring. I'm not as skilled at it, so I feel like this gives me a little bit more control. So I'm just kind of covering, I'm going to start with the two larger flowers, and I'm covering those with a little bit of water. And then I'm just adding a little bit of a darker blue marker, and this is actually called Peacock Blue. And then I'm just kind of spreading out the water with my paintbrush over that blue. And then I'm adding a little bit of a lighter blue, which is called Aquamarine, kind of blending it out. I'm just kind of adding water, adding marker, and kind of blending everything together. And it kind of flows really nicely together. And you want to blend the dark the darker color out so that it kind of fades. And then I'm going to add a little bit of green to all of the leaves. Again, just adding a little bit of water, kind of spreading it out. And on the smaller leaves, the fine tip of the marker works really well too. You can just kind of dot it, get it right in there really close, and that works really well. And then for some of the little daisies, I'm just using some yellow and some kind of an orangey yellow color. And I'll list the colors that I used. They come in in different packs. I think they're called like nature florals. So I'll kind of list those in the show notes and over on my blog. And then for the panel on the front of my card, I'm using this embossing folder from Sizzix. It's called Woven, and it's just a pretty basket weave. And I'm going to add that to the front of a plain white note card. And this will just be a nice background for the floral frame, kind of going along with the idea of, you know, flowers going in a basket, but it's kind of a deconstructed look. I use this embossing folder a lot too. I really like it. Then I have a piece of vellum that I'm going to add my floral panel to, and it just kind of separates the two pieces of white cardstock, and it kind of gives it, kind of diffuses it in the middle there. So I'm just going to add my panel to the vellum, and then I'm going to add the entire piece to the front of the note card with some foam tape. This just gives another little layer of texture. And I'm just going to add it right to the middle there. And then for a final little embellishment, I'm going to use some Nuvo drops. And for my first card, I used clear drops. It was called Morning Dew. And that looked really good, but then I thought maybe I'd try something different. So for this card, I'm going to be using Dandelion Yellow, just to kind of pull the colors in from the flowers. You could also use a pink too. I have Strawberry Coulis. That would be really pretty. That can kind of pull in some of the little bit of the pink flowers. But I thought the yellow would look kind of bright and cheery, so I'm just adding a couple little drops, just kind of surrounding the sentiment, so it kind of draws your eye in towards the sentiment. And my card is finished. So I really like this kind of like old vintage look with the pretty flowers and the watercoloring, and using these markers is great because they kind of help you stay in control with the watercolor. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you in my next video.